And hello, welcome to a very, very special night on Narrative Live. It's here, it's finally here. The midterm elections are upon us. The results are beginning to come in. I am as bullish as I've been all the way through this entire process. I think it's going to be a great night for Democrats. I think the turnout and the very policies and the very fundamentals on which the Democrats ran on, plus a huge turnout from Gen Z today, suggests it's going to be a very, very good night. Now, we've already seen some of the incumbents like Marco Rubio and Rand Paul keep their seats, but that does not mean that there's a Republican red wave coming. In fact, the early results are showing that some of the thought about or the anticipated red wave or tsunami, as some people were saying, hasn't quite shown up. But the night is still young. There's lots still to go on. Hi, Eric. How are you?
Hey, Zeb.
We made it.
It's the kind of thing that we Washingtonian types, this is like our Hanukkah, our birthday, it only comes around once in a while.
Every 2 years, as it turns out. Thank God it's only once every 2 years, because otherwise it would be just, can you imagine if this happened more regularly? I'd be somewhat horrified if it happened on a regular basis, because I don't think my heart could take it.
Israel or the UK, where they're, exchanging prime ministers every few weeks like a do-si-do.
They do. Looks at the Maryland governor, too early to call as well. So we're watching like you are probably watching the TV networks. We can take that feed live, and we will as things happen. But, there is a general feeling amongst Democrats that just sort of today, suddenly people came up with the idea that this was actually looking quite good for Democrats, even though for the last few weeks, all you can hear from Republican pundits and pollsters is that, it's a definite win for the Republicans in the House, a definite win in the Senate, and they're also going to do really well in the House seats. That is not actually what's materializing this evening, I don't think, but it's still too early to completely say that. What did you see? What are your thoughts about it? You've obviously voted. There was a big decision that just came down for Vermont as well. What's your take on the overall day, and then what your thoughts are about Vermont and other interesting races?
So overall day is we sort of kicked off with both Missouri and Florida, two of our trouble hotspots, of course, with their elected officials saying that they were resisting the federal government's investigation into any voting issues, that the feds weren't allowed into this place, that we have the Voting Rights Act, which is federal, and the DOJ has a voting section. Anyhow, this is it went from ridiculous to very amusingly threatening for the people who came up with this, because what they're trying to investigate here in Cole County, which is where Jefferson City, Missouri is, it's the capital here. There's apparently some voting places where the disabled entrances, I think specifically the ramps for wheelchairs and whatnot to get in, those were frozen. Or sorry, those were locked and you couldn't get in them. So that's a violation of you may be depriving someone of the right to vote there. Yeah. And Americans with Disabilities Act, that's the kind of thing you would investigate.
They were just not opened. They were just not opened by the election officials today. They just decided to skip it, or what?
It's been some problem. I don't know. I do not know how what the inception of the investigation was, but it is a very appropriate investigation. And the Secretary of State, Jay Ashcroft, whose father is, of course, foreign agent John Ashcroft, registered for Democratic Republic of Congo, and the 1MDB guys, and Ihor Kolomoisky,
all your best friends, all the kind of people you want to be seen with in polite society. I'm being sarcastic.
The worst K-pop boy band in history. That's their clients.
Yeah.
He said that the feds were not allowed to come in and investigate because something. They're inconvenient. It's not a good time. We're washing our hair. Come back.
Yeah.
But here's the thing, though. You have a right to vote under the Constitution. All right. So it is a right guaranteed by the Constitution. Now, if somebody locked those doors on purpose to deprive American citizens of a constitutionally guaranteed right, and they're like elected officials or something, and they're acting under color of law with their authority in order to deprive a constitutional right, that is a felony cognizable under 18 U.S. Code 242 or 241 if you have a conspiracy going, which would make it a criminal investigation. And if you impede a federal agent from investigating, an investigation. Now, if you do so accidentally because it's undercover and you don't realize that you're doing it, I think you get a pass on that if you get in their way. But if they know that the feds are investigating and you go to destroy evidence or impede their progress, that's a 20-year prison sentence under 18 U.S. Code 1519. So
not something you want to be doing.
It could be that not just, some people behind the voting center there, but possibly even our Secretary of State, Jay Ashcroft, may have gotten himself in felony hot water today. And they're doing the same damn thing down in Florida.
Yeah. Oh, really? That's interesting because they didn't allow, in terms of not allowing any federal observers in Florida, they decided that was not kosher for them today as well. So is that what you're referring to, or you're referring to the actual closing of the doors?
They don't like their aftershave. It's not a good smell. I mean, there's not a lot of. It's like, I'm sorry you don't like the 10th Amendment. You guys get all hot about the Second Amendment, but you're really not a big fan of the 10th Amendment that says the feds have things that are their jurisdiction.
It's not a good idea, obviously, but these guys have become professionals at suppressing the vote in every way they can. Whether it's in Georgia, where the rules are so ridiculous, you can't even have water being handed out to people standing in line, for hours to exercise their rights. You can't hand out water to people. How ridiculous a rule is that? Now you're telling me about wheelchair accessibility being cut off. It's just. It's ludicrous what the Republican Party has become. It's become a satire of itself. It's a joke.
Well, I mean, it's satire actually of the Democratic Party from back when they were the Dixiecrats, but because it was flipped, the kind of the polarities on this were flipped. But note that these are both slave states that kind of have a long history of making things difficult for certain people voting, which is why
they have an expertise in that.
It's why the 14th Amendment exists. It's why the Department of Justice was created. And it's why there's the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, the Americans with Disabilities Act, is that, there's some places in the United States that, they have their own laws, but they don't like even following their own laws on the state level. And that's why we have a federal Department of Justice, so that, no one can depart from the rule of law too far, which big fan.
It wasn't only there, of course, today. There was a lot of issues in other parts of the United States in terms of where people could successfully exercise their votes, and particularly in Arizona, as you can see from the slide that we have up right now, which I hope you can see, there were instances in Maricopa County where we were told by election officials that voting machines weren't working, and there were other people who were concerned the tabulation wasn't happening correctly. Now, this is potentially as well another Republican Party sort of stunt, possibly by the gubernatorial candidate there, who is maybe just trying to do this so she can get into the court system and start complaining about the votes not being counted correctly as a sort of a hedge before the election results are actually fully tabulated. It seems really suspicious that all of this is coming out of the wacky state of Arizona, which is, of course, now the home of every conspiracy theory you can imagine. So a couple of reports came out on Twitter just a short while ago about that. Also, there's Donald Trump, former president of the United States, claiming that there is absentee ballot situation happening in Detroit. None of this is actually happening. This is all his imagination. The Secretary of State there, Jocelyn Benson, responding, "Hi again. This isn't true. Please don't spread lies to foment and encourage political violence in our state or anywhere. Thank you." I mean, he just hasn't changed one bit. The ACLU is reporting that people have been told that they have to vote up and down a straight line. In other words, vote all Republican or all Democrats. That, of course, is not true, and they're investigating that. And in Georgia's largest county, 2 poll workers were removed from the job just before the polls began today, just before they opened today, after staff found out that found Facebook posts from a mother and her son who were working in the polling and counting station, showed them participating in the January 6th attack. So there you go. So apparently that's not a good idea either. You shouldn't be counting votes or doing any of that if you were part of the Jan 6 attempted coup by the former administration. And then, of course, in Texas, lots of machines, particularly in less white areas, all of them having difficulty in some of those machines working. So,
Also college towns.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, it's exactly right. So, the GOP continues its mockery of democracy, but I think it's going to cost them at the polls this time. I particularly see a real advantage coming to governors. I just see that there maybe is 6 governors races that are going to flip towards Democrats. That's the big news. I think Pennsylvania is going to go to the Democrats. In fact, let's pull up some of the results as we have them now as they're coming in. And forgive me here, this is not our usual. I don't have a fancy studio. We just have myself and my computer here.
We're just fancy people.
So I'm going to do my best to navigate to what we have here, which is interactive graphics, which show us this is the Senate. Sorry, the Senate's on the right. There is probably where most of these results are coming in right now, and you can see that in Florida, Rubio's won that. In Alabama, oops, what happens when I do that? Oops, something changes. Did it change for you? I don't know if it did. It's giving me direct results. I've just sent it here. It's saying that Katie Britt, GOP, looks like she's ahead there. It isn't changing for you, though. I can tell that. I don't know why. Let me see if I can get back to where I was. So I can't actually get back to where I was. So let me try again. Oh, it's fun too when you play these games on TV. But you're seeing those red lines being filled in expected places. I don't think there's been any surprises there. What's happening there in Pennsylvania? No, let me just pull out here. That's Kentucky. That's Rand Paul that we saw Kentucky winning there. Let me pull back here and I'll put us back on camera while I figure out what I did wrong with the graphics over here. But it looks like it's going to be, I think, still a very, very good night. It's particularly now as we're seeing the results coming out of New Hampshire, early results, only 9% in. But Maggie Hassan seems to be doing quite a good job of defeating Donald Boldich. I know how you say his name, Boldich, I think. And that is an interesting race because I think Democrats were supportive of him initially. They thought that maybe he'd be easier to defeat. So he's one of these election deniers that we saw Democrats actually
domestic
support.
Terrorist.
Yeah, absolutely, domestic terrorist. It's interesting that he's not doing well. That's good that he's not doing well, but he is doing better in some of these smaller towns. We're seeing some of the advantage leaning towards him. But I still think Maggie Hassan is going to win, and I think that's going to set up a night of enormous celebration for the Democrats because once that happens, and let's assume, and it's a big assumption, but let's assume that the Democrats win Pennsylvania, the Senate looks really in their sights at that point. Not guaranteed, but it's within their sights at that point. So that's a good thing. I'm not going to be able to get these graphics back working, so let's just, I think I might just kill them.
New Hampshire's become more of a swing state. They march to the beat of their own drummer. If you know people from New Hampshire, and I lived there for a few years when I was a kiddo. They do
strange.
whatever they want.
A little odd, a little on the strange side, but God bless them. We love them. Tell me what happens in Vermont. That was an interesting...
they're calling the race in Vermont early. Do we have a graphic?
We have a graphic. You're missing the bottom part of it where you can see that he's being called. But tell us who these candidates are and who won.
So Gerald Leroy is an Army veteran and defense contractor dude who rolled into Vermont 2 years ago, I think, to buy a house. I think he would go there on vacation occasionally. Now, Peter Welch is our current congressman. We only have one congressman in Vermont. And Peter took over from Bernie Sanders when Bernie Sanders ran for Jim Jeffords' seat. And that stays today. We're pretty loyal in Vermont. If you're doing a good job, then we keep voting you in, and if we don't, it's because we've decided that you probably do less damage if you're not in Vermont. So we tend to keep our senators for 40-50 years. But Welch actually lives in Vermont. He was elected to the legislature of the state legislature in 1981, and he's actually not from Vermont. He's from Springfield, Mass, which is right over the border, which doesn't make him a native Vermonter. But he actually has lived there, has green license plates, 802 phone number, and knows how to pronounce the town names, as opposed to this guy who rolls into town, buys his third home a couple years ago, and just decides to start spreading abortion propaganda and critical race theory. And critical race theory discussions in Vermont is insane, because you'd have to prove that there's more than one race, which that is hypothetical at best in Vermont. It's down to English and French Canadian for the most part. But anyhow, Pete Welch is an actual public servant who's greatly respected. And there's a cool little feature here that I picked up on that
we'll go back to that slide right away. I think you're just about to talk about something specific. Yeah, go ahead.
So Pete, in certain Vermont patriotism move and a trolling move, he's wearing a hat that has the flag of the Vermont Republic. Now remember, Vermont was the first country the first European country established in North America, because the United States didn't get around to forming itself as a government until after the war. Vermont, of course, there was only 18 people and 5 raccoons to do it. But Vermont got a flag, started printing currency, raised an army, Ethan Allen and the Green Mountain Boys. Mm-hmm. So we actually entered the Union in 1791. We agreed to come by and give it a try. And it was a 200-year experiment that apparently ended in 1991, and we had a separatist movement and discussion, and I guess we had the legal right under some old document that we could secede peacefully if we wanted to. And we discussed it, and we realized we would be slightly poorer per capita than Namibia, and that it just wasn't worth the trouble, and that we thought the other Americans, they're not like us, but they're pretty nice. So anyhow,
that's a very interesting history of Vermont. Thank you. And you even got to name check the good people of Namibia, so that's good.
but wearing that is not just a tip of the hat to the Republic, long may it stand, but also a reminder to the other guy who just moved in, because the last such race that was like this was 1998. There was no Republican candidate, so they got a dairy farmer named Fred Tuttle to run in the primary, because there was a Mitt Romney type from Boston. He was a partner at Boston Consulting Group, Jack McMullen, who did the same thing. He bought an apartment 2 doors up from where I was living in Burlington, Vermont. It had 1 chair in it, and he started running TV ads of him in a cardigan sitting on hay bales the way nobody does. And so he decided he was going to run for the Republican seat against Pat Leahy. And running against Pat Leahy, he was generally suicide until he finally aged out. And this real dairy farmer with no budget started debating him, and there was a killer question in the debates between Jack McMullen and Fred Tuttle, and Tuttle asked McMullen famously, "How many tits on Jersey cow? How many teats are on a Jersey cow?"
What's the answer to that question?
well, what McMullen answered was 6. And the response from dairy farmer Fred Tuttle was, "I guess so, 6 tit on a cow. I guess so." I guess so means you've just uttered the stupidest thing I ever heard. I guess, I guess so. Yeah, and so
what was the answer? Do we have an answer on how many?
4.
4,
4 hanging down. So if you're going to run for one of the top 100 seats in most powerful seats in America, you should probably know something about the state you're in,
and the number of teats on a cow.
Well, it was more indicative. And then he did the thing where he produced a list of town. I mean, look, McMullen's a very bright fellow, and he slayed Fred on the questions about interest rates and full employment. Points to the partner from Boston Consulting Group. He won those. Yeah. But then when Fred Tuttle gave him a list of town names to pronounce, every place in the world has town names that are only the locals know how it's actually said.
Yeah, many places,
it was Pompanusik,
Pompanusik?
Winooski, Pompanusik. It's which is a very long Indian name.
Mhm.
And then we have the thing in Vermont where we say some names are pronounced French and some aren't. So he was given Vergennes, which is more French, and then he was given Calais, which is spelled like Calais.
Mhm.
And so he made him read this live on the air, and this dude is not from Vermont. He's never driven around. He didn't spend any time there. He didn't know the people. He didn't know and he didn't know how many tits were on a cow. And so he
You
lost.
don't get to win. You don't get to win that way. Not in Vermont, apparently. Hey, we should catch people up on what's going on. Unless you want to finish this. Is there more? Is there more to that? Because I'll take more of that.
It was a heartwarming story. Fred won the GOP primary over the millionaire from Boston. And then as soon as he won the primary, he said that he would let Pat Leahy win even if you voted for him. So it was kind of one of the last nice, it was actually, honestly, it's a nice reminder. It's like there wasn't too much vitriol about it.
Yeah. It was all the old days of real politics and not this crazy political era that we're in now. So in terms of the control of Congress, it looks like Democrats are now at 40, Republicans at 35. Sorry, that's the Senate, of course. Sorry about that. And then in the House, we're looking at 13 to 22 right now in terms of where there's actual progress. So it's pretty much the same situation. It doesn't look to me like the House is fully. We haven't seen enough numbers there to figure out if the House is going to stay Democrat, but it does feel to me like the Senate has a good shot at that, of staying Democrat at this point. And the prognosis looks pretty good so far. Also, we should mention that Governor Tim Scott of firstly, Wes Moore of Maryland, one of the most incredible candidates you've ever seen. Incredibly, this is, I think, his first time in office, in any office. He's won as the governor of Maryland, and that's Wes Moore. He's won that. And we should also point out that where is it? Mr. Scott has also won. Where is he? Sorry, over here. So I don't remember where Tim Scott was the governor of, but I should know that. Anyhow, he won too. So we'll get back to North Carolina. Thank you. So that's good. Some real big, and there's another Democratic one we just saw in Vermont. We mentioned Peter Welch, but there's another one out of. It's gone now off the screen, but there was another governor just announced on MSNBC that she retains her position. So it's still looking very strong for the Democrats, and I'm going to run through a few of the reasons that I think it's going really well for Democrats today, because there's it's a good day for the Democrats, regardless of whether they win the House or not. And this is something to keep the back of your mind when the Republicans, or if the Republicans win the House, it's still a great day if they don't get beaten by 40 or 50 seats, which is what the projections were, not so long ago. It's quite possible the Republicans could eke out a victory in the House. But if it's only a few seats, if it's under 10 seats, it's a disastrous night for the Republicans. And it does mean that overall, the message that Americans are delivering to our politicians is democracy matters, and so do our rights. And just to run through some of I did a top 10 for us because I knew we'd have lots of time to talk tonight. The top 10 things that made Democrats show up tonight. Number 10 is that democracy is hot. And it really is. I mean, you can't, we started out 6 years ago, you and I here on Twitter doing different things. But at that point, democracy had just come under attack. And you were the guy who raised the alarm first before anybody else that I'm aware of on Twitter. And it is that actual clarion call that happened 6 years ago that has now led to, a lot of people, if not the majority, probably the majority of people in the United States recognizing that democracy is under attack. Now, of course, you're not the only person to credit there, because there's a lot of other brave people who did that.
There's one very important person to credit there, and that's Yevgeny Prigozhin.
Yes,
from Putin's chef there, who said, "Damn right, we interfered in your elections, and we'll do it again." So. Yeah. I guess it wasn't a conspiracy theory, was it, guys?
It was not a conspiracy theory. You were 100% correct, and everyone else was wrong who's making fun of you or criticizing you. And not only...
Don't ask me. Ask Russian intelligence.
And
they'll tell you they did it.
And back then, it felt like a Herculean task to convince an entire American population that what had happened had actually happened, because they were so in the grips of Fox News and OAN and whatever, Mike Flynn
and Hillary should have campaigned in Wisconsin, where she campaigned.
Yeah.
And it's not her emails, it's how she handled the email story, when in reality, it was data from Facebook was, plugged into supercomputers owned by, military intelligence, and they were targeting voters to discourage them from going out using the most sophisticated and invasive digital methods we'd ever seen.
Yeah.
With the highest level of precision, and multiple countries coordinated, such as Israel and some others.
Saudi Arabia, UAE, Egypt, you name it. There's a whole bunch of them that were involved in it. Some countries that we used to consider allies, maybe we don't consider them allies anymore. But nevertheless, 6 years to fight all of that, to fight that huge tide of propaganda that had hit America and this attack on democracy. And, coming from your original call there to all the other people on Twitter and all the other activists who heard that call and other calls, and then were able to convince a large amount of Americans that democracy is actually in trouble, that the attack on democracy is actually real, and that it was something to consider in voting. And in fact, not just considering voting, but actually place right at the top of your voting. So that's a good one. Democracy's hot. At number 9, I had turnout, because there was a huge turnout today and over the last few weeks as early voting was taking place. There was 43 million votes cast before voting stations opened this morning. That's a lot of people to vote.
Who are all the new voters? Who are they? They're women. Who don't like the insane, hey, we have an idea. If you need obstetrics and gynecology care to take care of a routine but tragic, loss of a pregnancy, you can die of overwhelming sepsis instead. Turns out that a quasi-permanent threat to every woman's health in this entire country is kind of a motivator. Yeah. It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and I find this just a fascinating thing that the news media declared that irrelevant quite soon on in their process. They sort of moved past the whole abortion thing, it's nothing, not a big deal. Of course, that's not the reality. Women care about their rights. They care about whether they have ability to choose whether they should can have an abortion or reproduce or whatever else they decide to have about their bodies. They own that right and have always, at least for the last 50 years, have had that right. And suddenly to take it away was going to be a motivating factor. The news media sort of forgot about that, started talking about inflation and other stuff. But guess what? They showed up. They showed up in the last few weeks, and they showed up today in big numbers to vote for the Democrats. And it's a big, big election issue. I think 60% of the voters said that this was an issue that they voted on because they was angry or somewhat angry about the abortion ruling.
Again, life and death questions tend to be. It's amazing. They use this issue for so long. Republicans did cynically, and there's some other. There's a multitude of reasons behind the policy. Some of it's creating, an adoption pipeline of kids that end up in different circumstances. Not all of them good. It was a way to create single issue voters, with the constant, never quite get their promise that, we will get rid of Roe v. Wade eventually. They just kept that as the tantalizing carrot, out in front to keep chasing after. But they just went ahead and did it finally, and places like Missouri, outlawed entirely, such that even, necessary medical care is denied to women, even though that's forbidden under federal law, and likely a violation of the Hippocratic Oath for the caregivers. And, worse, when some woman reported her, her terrible story, and was in a political ad for the hottest race, as far as I'm concerned, the most important race is Eric Schmidt versus Trudy Bush Valentine. Trudy Bush Valentine puts out an ad with this woman just telling her story about how she had to go to a far off state to get necessary medical care at great risk to her life. And then Missouri state government started investigating in an aggressive way the healthcare center that she was at. And then the feds came in and they opened up their first official case investigation there. So
yeah, look, I mean, that's the biggest issue, obviously, for women voters, but it's much more than that issue because, there's other rights that Republicans and the Supreme Court are coming after. There's gay rights, there's freedom of speech rights, there's freedom of gathering right. These are all things that they're intending to prosecute still in the Supreme Court. Now, this is one of those things that makes a huge difference, because there's huge turnout. Let's just say the Democrats win the House and they win the Senate. It's a lot easier now for them to codify Roe v. Wade as their first act if they win those two houses, those two chambers. That's how important these votes are. They will forever probably determine the rights of whether women can have these abortions in the United States on a national level. So this is a crucial vote. This was today was one of the watershed moments of America, and no doubt we'll see a lot more implications coming from just today's turnout and the like. The other thing that came up a lot was candidate quality. This is, by his own admission, Mitch McConnell did not seem to think that they were fielding the best candidates in the field. And in fact, Republicans generally suck at this, not because they don't have some big names. They do have some big names that they've been able to draft in, like Mehmet Oz and Herschel Walker. But there's such a field of crazy, loony people out there who believe the strangest things that, it's just, how do you let them into another session of government? You just it seems impossible and a dumb thing to do.
I mean, some of these people are blisteringly insane.
Yeah.
Or openly criminal. And we have a political party that embrace that. I'm thinking of the North Carolina race between Ted Budd and Sherry Beasley.
Yeah, and Beasley's doing quite well there. Eh? She's at 52% now, and he's 46, and that's with 55% of the vote counted. It could be if she wins and Hassan wins. Those are big indicators. Tim Ryan, by the way, 29% of the vote in at 56.9. Vance at 43%. Boy, those are. I'm telling you, there's a movement here of Democratic voters that is going to upset the apple cart of what Washington insiders were expecting to happen, and it's about time. This might be the night we bury the GOP as we know it, and maybe that's exactly what needs to happen.
Well, maybe that's exactly what needs to happen. So, like, to go back to the North Carolina race on quality there, Sherry Beasley, I believe, was Supreme the top judge in their Supreme Court, anyways.
Right.
And a very learned woman and a public servant. And Ted Budd is a guy who hates socialism but took the largest PPP loan in the entire state. And just
these people and their PPE fraud. I mean, it's just astonishing to me. It's just it's like of all the things to do when you're running for office or you're an influencer or someone who's in public, to then go and take a fraudulent PPE loan is just I don't know.
It's the purple dye of criminality.
It's just gross. It's just gross. Do you hear what's happened to what's his name? I'm terrible at football. Guy with the guy who's got that scandal around him, Brent Favre. Is that his name?
Brent Favre. Yeah, like
so he was lying about all the medication that he was pushing. He was lying about that. I mean, it's like, what is wrong with you? What is wrong with you?
He was defrauding the state's welfare program. Yeah. I mean, like, I understand. Like, there's a lot of like match fixing, issues. Actually, we don't want to get too far off on it, but yeah, no, there's some heavy duty hand in the cookie jar criminality, and the PPP loans. I think we've talked about this before. Anytime your municipality takes over $10,000 of funds from the federal government, guess who gets jurisdiction and venue for the criminal proceedings. So you might have,
Oh, I see.
Sheriff Jim Bob's fixing things for you, and you kind of know the local judge. But if your town took 10 grand, or your county took 10 grand, Merry Christmas. Merrick Garland is the guy prosecuting you.
I see what happens. I see that's very different stage completely. I should mention that Governor DeSantis has won re-election as Florida governor. That's not a surprise by any stretch of the imagination. It's not something that Donald Trump is necessarily celebrating. I even wonder whether he voted for Governor DeSantis, because today, just because he is Donald Trump, he had to say this. And sometimes I resist the urge
to applaud his intention to run for president, right?
He didn't do just that. He also said, if he did run, I will tell you things about him that won't be very flattering. I know more about him than anybody other than perhaps his wife, who is really running his campaign. I think like a little bit of blackmail, or whatever that is. I don't even know what that is. From your own former president of your own party. I mean, it's, what a disaster. Someone's feeling a little threatened.
Especially since that guy, you're talking about some smack talk from a dude that had access to the presidential daily brief every day for 4 years.
Yeah.
Who
a lot of.
Yeah.
So not only DeSantis wins, I mean, re-election here, but he's also like the next big thing in the Republican Party, likely the next presidential candidate for the Republican Party. So, Trump is out there doing his thing. Now, of course, there's a lot of baggage around Mr. DeSantis. This is not just, he's not just hinting at stuff. There is stuff in DeSantis's family background, which, is serious and is going to come out at some point, obviously, because as he gets closer to the presidency, he's going to, that stuff's going to emerge. So even though he has a big night tonight winning, already Donald Trump is out there saying, if the Dems don't do it, I'm going to do it.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting?
It's interesting. It's interesting. I wonder how he knows all this information as well, because I'm sure it's not just from being privy to the presidential daily brief. I'm sure it's from his own, history.
So, there's that. He's been doing business in Florida, and he's a guy who knows a lot of spies and stuff.
And mobsters, he likes mob. Yeah, he likes the mob in two ways. He likes the mobs that when they attack the Capitol, but he also likes the other kind of mob, the actual money mob. It's interesting that already this is turning out to be another shit show, if you pardon that, in the Republican Party. And God bless them, may they take each other out. Although, I should caution people that there's going to be a tendency to want to support DeSantis because he's not Trump, but he's worse than Trump. So, if anyone's out there thinking, well, at least he's not Trump, that is not the case at all. He's
Trump without the class.
Yeah.
And refined.
Yeah. That's one way of putting it. So as we keep watching these results, it's 40-37 in the Senate and 18-31 Republicans now in the House. I'm not sure which races those are, but judge orders Harris County polling stations to stay open an extra hour. That's what that's about. Governor Sununu wins a fourth term in New Hampshire. That's interesting. Ex-press secretary Sanders wins the Arkansas governor's race. She did find an alternative career. So that's interesting. She's won the governor race in Arkansas. Debbie Stabenow is told that, I can't read that, so all right. I don't even know, I can't get to that. Let me find it here. Let me get back to you on that one. But there was a headline around Stabenow, and I don't have that here.
We got a governor. We have a governorship that's been called.
Yeah, where's that?
State of Vermont has reelected Phil Scott 72-21. His Democratic rival, Brenda Siegel. They have 16% of the votes in, with the remaining 242,000 apparently. But you must be taking the samples, and they got a pretty strong. They must have their math down. Now, here's the thing: Vermont is considered by the way, we're talking about Vermont not because it's the most important, but because it's the earliest.
Yeah, the earliest, yeah.
But it's very interesting. Governor Rick Scott is he is a Republican, and this is this super this is a super reliably blue state. We got Bernie Sanders progressives, and that kind of a thing.
Yeah.
But Governor Scott in Vermont was one of the first, if not the first, Republican governor, I believe, who came out and cast down Donald Trump after January 6th. So
there you go.
When I said, we tend to stick with people that are doing a good thing, he also made the first change to Vermont gun laws in the history since the establishment of the National Firearms Act. He got rid of bump stocks.
Oh, that's interesting. You know what? I'm going to pause you there. I'm going to take like a 10-second little break here. I'm just going to do something, and then I'll be right back on the other side of this. In the meantime, don't forget, you can always support us at patreon.com/narrative.
Every minute of Narrative's reporting, every story that we break is made possible by our patrons. You too can become a patron by joining at patreon.com/narrative.
Narrative, where truth lives.
We're back. So what should we do next? We keep going down through my list here. It's interesting that there's, I think we're still seeing signs of a really impressive turnout by the Democrats. I certainly hope it holds true for the rest of the night. We were talking about the quality of the candidates before we left to give you the results update. So the next thing in line is, and this was pretty remarkable today, and I think that this cannot be understated, is Gen Z showing up at the polls today in their hundreds and hundreds of thousands. I've got a video which I hopefully can pull up for you here, which showed how many of them showed up and how long the lines were. I think there was a 360% increase in some states like Wisconsin. This is a very activated...
300, really?
Yeah, 260%. This is a really activated community now. Young people...
If that holds across the whole state after they tabulate the whole thing, then that's tectonic, because I believe the rule of thumb is that the turnout tends to match the percentage turnout matches the age. So 20% of 20-year-olds, 40% of 40-year-olds, 80% 80-year-olds. It drops off after that, just like humans do. So getting the kids to come out is really the thing.
Yeah. This is a very activated and involved generation. I mean, I don't know if you have any people in your life for that generation. Seems if you do, they're smart. They know what's going on. They're not just waiting for their adults to take hold of their future. They're determining it themselves. And I think it's going to be
they just watched an attempted coup d'etat. Maybe they're like, "Holy crap, we gotta tune in, guys."
And so what you're going to get, I think, is throughout the entire country. I think you're going to get a huge turnout, especially in places like Georgia, where there's been a real move to bring out the younger voters. I think that's going to change the dynamic a lot, and it's unexpected. And by a vast number, I think they lean Democrats. So it's impressive that they came out. They're not typically a group that comes out in a midterm election, and they not only came out, but they came out in their droves today. They're well organized, and they know what they're voting for and what they care about. It's a big reason I think we're going to see another, a huge night for the Democrats. Of course, that doesn't mean that they're going to walk away with a landslide, but it does mean that they could win both the House and the Senate. And although maybe not so much anymore in the House, but I still believe that they will. I'm going to stick with my prediction around that. All right, so we should know the control of the Senate in the next while, by the way. So that's we'll know more about that in the near future. Meanwhile, number 6 that I had in my list was the incredible closing of former President Obama, who, I don't know, that guy is just the best. I've seen him up close do it when he was running for his first presidency, for his first term as president. But he still has that thing. He connects with people. He understands their problems. He can articulate very complex things in very easy ways for people to understand. And he's just so likable. He's so darn likable that his presence in the last few days, I think, has really focused people on issues like Medicare and these Republicans are intending to cause havoc if they win the House and the Senate. They're going to repeal the Inflation Reduction Act. They're going to try shut down the government. They're going to start investigating President Biden, and then they're going to slash Medicare. I mean, it's a kind of like the Grinch version of what you want from your politicians arriving in power. I don't understand why people vote for them at all, but nevertheless, that is what their plan is. So we shall see.
We have another race called here. Attorney General of Massachusetts, Maura Healey, has been elected the governor of that state.
Oh.
And she is the first lesbian to serve as a governor of a state. So,
well done, Massachusetts.
And she's a great attorney general. So,
well done. That's good to hear. And why was the seat vacated? Do you know? Do you know that, or am I just asking too many questions?
I forget what happened after Marty Walsh went down to be head of the Department of Labor.
Okay, that was probably it. Right. So it was vacated then. Well, that's it's pretty impressive night so far. Chris Van Hollen still is projected to keep his seat. Tammy Duckworth expected to keep her seat in Illinois. James Langford expected to keep his in Oklahoma, and we mentioned Peter Walsh already as well. We'll keep watching it. DeSantis win is probably the big headline for everybody right now, and that's probably going to be it for the GOP, in my opinion. I don't even think. I don't think they'll be able to pull off the House, but we shall see. There's big results coming in soon, but while we wait for those, let me just keep finishing up this list because we were at number 6. The other thing that made it, I think, is particularly impressive day for the Democrats is the pollster myth. So the reason, these pollsters, they're not telling you the truth on purpose. I know that they would like to tell you, and they swear up and down that they just got things wrong every single time because of error A or error B, or because they didn't sample correctly, or because, I don't know, whatever the factor was in every single year. But when it happens every single time, and they're basically no longer even remotely reliable.
They're more like propaganda.
They're more like propaganda. They're more like owned by people who are trying to get a message out about certain realities for whatever outcome they want. Either they want there to be an understanding that there'll be a red tide, and if there isn't, well, then they can claim that the whole thing was fraudulent, then they can claim the entire election was fraud because it didn't match those, or because, they actually think that that's going to encourage people to go out in the midterms because they're expecting the Republicans to win. I mean, whichever way it is, it's, it cuts both ways, but it still strikes me as true, and having worked with many of them, let me just say that they're amenable to phrasing things differently. It really matters how you phrase a question in a poll.
Sure.
And they're amenable. If you're going to want it to lean a certain way, you can certainly say, wouldn't it be better if we phrased it, this way? And that's how they do what they do. But yet the TV networks are consistently and constantly like at the, praise these people like they're some sort of gods because they deliver them news stories. But in fact, they're delivering them nonsense. It's nonsense. Every single news network and every single newspaper has for weeks been saying this is going to be a massive red tide, a complete Republican victory. I mean, it may still be, sure, it may still be, but it's not looking like that, not looking like that at all.
So if you know anybody in the actual electioneering business, the people that actually run serious, elections, real polling that they use is expensive. And, I may talk to some of these people from time to time, and what's on the news and what they're seeing with the real polls that they did, it's often a big swing. So, yeah.
I mean,
the narrative industrial complex.
Yeah, that's a good way. That's a great way of putting it. Because when you think about it, if you've got 40 million voters who are showing up early and they're new voters, and it's clear that they're more likely to vote for Democrats, and you're still predicting a Republican victory, you're not doing your job. You're not it's obvious. Those kind of facts are not, they're easy to see because the results are actually there on a daily basis. We can see every day how many people were voting, and so it's time for the pollster industry to give up the game, or for the news media to divorce them, or something. But the fact that we now have weeks and weeks of narrative built around these guys showing up with their fake polls, they're really truly fake polls, it has to end. It's just nonsense. Just in the number of New Hampshire there, Hassett is doing particularly well still, with quite a large number of the votes accounted. Of course, it's still too early to call, but boy, and it looks like North Carolina, still too early to call. Beasley 52, his Bud's 47. And Tim Ryan up 54% to J.D. Vance's 45%. Oh my gosh, that is a big night for Democrats. It really is a big night for Democrats, and it's going to be very hard for.
Did you watch the debate between Ryan and Vance? I almost called 911 and reported.
Well, I didn't see what happened. I just
rhetorical version.
I saw some clips from it. It was pretty harsh.
If you want to run against Nancy Pelosi, move back home to San Francisco and run against her. Ouch. But then I actually ran against her for Speaker of the House. But they're going to eat you up there. They're going to eat you like they're going to chew on you. You're going to be a chew toy in Washington, D.C. I was like,
well, I mean, it's
kind of beautiful.
I mean, J.D. Vance is I'm sure a capable guy. He clearly has succeeded in doing some things. He wrote an interesting book and runs a podcast company of some sort. But is he he's doing
a great job working for Peter Thiel, but
yeah, that's basically it.
Those guys do anyhow.
Well, I mean, that's what they do. They run podcast companies. They write books. I don't know what they do, but it's true that he is a terrible politician and that he's kowtowing to anything Donald Trump did. I mean, literally, I think Donald Trump used the word ass kissing.
Trump then humiliated him. It's beautiful.
I mean,
sometimes I wonder if Trump's trying to work off a sentence in advance, or he's got to deal with the feds. Just look. It's my conspiracy theory. I wonder sometimes.
It's possible. Number 4, the reason I think the Democrats are doing amazingly tonight is the people of Twitter. I'm going to say that we spoke about this already a little bit, but there are a lot of people who spent the last 6 years on Twitter just working away at what was being fed to all of us by the national media and by politicians and you name it. Now, some of them had agendas, of course, but I don't know if we would have arrived at this point where democracy is the number one issue along some other factors, but clearly one of the leading issues that people are voting, if it weren't for the people of Twitter who kept the fight alive over the last few years. So I know because we're on this venue, on this particular platform, I thought it's worthwhile shouting out to all of you guys for doing such a good job of keeping the issue alive, because I don't think we would be here without you. The number 3 reason I think Democrats are doing really well tonight, if I can pull it up here. Oh, not this one. I have not got a number 3. I don't know what happened to number 3. Oh dear. I'm going to jump to number 2, and we'll get to number 3 later on. Number 2, people love their rights. I mean, they just do. People are actually, fond of the freedoms they've been getting in the history of the United States, and they continue to get better. And why not hold on to your rights? If you're a person of color, if you're a person who's from the LGBTQ community, if you're a person who wants to just determine whether they can have an abortion or not, boy, it's a great thing to have those rights and to, actually have life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness is a real thing that you can hold on to. And that's why people want to come to live in America. And that's the number 2 reason for why people, I think, came out to vote in the great numbers as they did today for the Democrats, and why it's going to be such an awful, awful night, I think, for the Republicans. Yeah, go ahead.
Let's see. So they're going at they're going at people's right to vote. They're going at people's right to healthcare. Starting with if you're a woman, but all these other things. Going at the rule of law. I mean,
yeah, they don't like the laws very much. Not applied to them. They're not liking that. And the number 1 reason I'm going to say this, even though people have been saying. Everywhere, people are so harsh on President Biden. I don't understand why. I think he really is doing a remarkable job as the president of the United States in the most complicated, difficult times ever. And I will say his managing of the campaign over the last few weeks and months has been kind of amazing. There's been lots of critics out there saying, where's your economic message? Where's your inflation message? He has been reminding people again and again and again that it's democracy, democracy, democracy. Without democracy, you get none of these other things. So, and at the same time, he's also been doing a great job with the economy and the inflation and all those other things that he did need to do. So
he took office as COVID was ripping us apart, and we did not intentionally, but from these malefactors that came before him, we didn't have a public health strategy to to get through this. I mean, we had mass death.
Yeah.
That's what he inherited, an attempted coup d'etat, mass death, businesses collapsing because of these new social protocols, and realizing that the prior 4 years of the White House was just almost half a decade of foreign agents with sledgehammers and crowbars in the most sensitive positions possible, and a wide swath of DOJ locations were actually crime scenes themselves. After bar. After, yeah. I mean, can you imagine that? Like trying to reestablish the rule of law and like prosecute something when the place that you prosecute is the place that prosecute where you have the problem with the thing and the stuff. I mean, and this administration has done all that, put China in the corner, start yanking semiconductor manufacturing back, sanction the living crap out of the Russian oligarchs.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's just remarkable. It's just they faced the world starting in the administration that they could not recognize. All the people they thought may have been their allies were not allies anymore. I mean, the world that they had left behind 4 years earlier under Obama had completely turned around under Trump. Suddenly, their allies were their enemies, and there was so much damage done on the world stage to the American image around the world and to our alliances around the world that we were the laughing stock of the world. And so to be able to turn around from that and manage a war like the war in Ukraine on top of everything else they've been doing is remarkable. And I understand that he's not the most incredible speaker in the entire world, but he is the most incredible president we've had for a very long time, if not, I'll just say for a very long time. It's remarkable that we've had someone who's had so much experience and so much knowledge in the White House. And I don't care if he doesn't deliver a speech absolutely perfectly or if he stumbles over a word or two. It isn't actually the only thing that he does in that job. And I think TV people sometimes forget about that. They don't realize there's actual decision-making going on in the background. And he's not just a figurehead who goes out there and has to look good on TV. There's a lot going on. And this guy does it without any scandal. He shows up to work every day. He doesn't insult people. He doesn't offend people. He doesn't shock the entire world. He just does what he needs to do, and he does it well, under extraordinarily difficult circumstances.
He's been in the government business, the highest levels, 40 to 50 years now. Yeah. And there's stuff that I think is amazing in terms of returning this, just turning this country around in terms of rule of law. He's picked a lot of people of extraordinary talent to be his cabinet secretaries. And I am a DC guy. I have no rose-colored glasses when it comes to federal bureaucracy. Yeah. I don't normally have, this is unusual for me to make these kind of superlative statements. I'm not a fanboy for the feds. I know them. I'm among them. They're my friends. Not everybody's great at their job. However, there's people of an enormous talent facing major challenges and leading major change. Gina Raimondo is Secretary of Commerce. It's going to take a while for people to realize what a great job she is doing. Treasury is dealing with fiscal policy, but also money laundering investigations and FinCEN and getting that all back in order. And some agencies that you wouldn't think of as being particularly heroic, Health and Human Services, which literally had Michael Caputo in there. They had a Russian, an employee of Vladimir Putin last time.
Incredible.
Sabotaging sabotaging, the response to COVID. I mean, just an absolute crime scene. And who puts out an investigative document that was done in conjunction with criminal law enforcement investigations about foster kids in Missouri going missing and likely being sex trafficked. That was Health and Human Services, Office of the Inspector General. Those nerds are crushing it, baby, because that report they put out in September 2021, that got us over to the Agape School story, to the story of the abuse of foster kids, all over the place. It's caught fire. Meanwhile, they are putting people in jail for all manner of defrauding healthcare and siphoning cash off, and as well as curtailing the opioid crisis by going after doctors who are writing these prescriptions that they're not supposed to be. I mean, that's just that's the Office of Inspector General of an agency most people don't ever think about, and they are turning up like damn near daily on justice.gov, helping put like bad guys in jail and like make healthcare cheaper, and that's pretty cool. And then
it is pretty cool.
We don't even think about the Secretary of Defense. He's just out there busy rebuilding our alliances. Boom, 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 boom.
And fighting a war. I mean, that's another thing. I should mention that they're running through right now the latest poll closings, and there are, most of these Senate races that Republicans we thought would have won really, really easily are still too close to call, or too early to call in some cases. But it's tight out there for Republicans. I got to say, it's not going to be an easy run for them as they attempt to reconstruct their Senate there. It looks like some of these biggest names are not winning as quickly as they thought they would have. Even Grassley doesn't look like he's there yet. That's a surprise as far as I'm concerned. I think we're going to see a very difficult night for the Republicans. I think the turnout has been large around the country, and it's especially in the Senate. I think it's going to be a surprising day. It is too early to call most of these races, but it's surprising that they're too early to call. These should have been easy victories. All right, so you're right about those incredible cabinet secretaries who have championed all these causes. Energy is another one where there's been a tremendous, just a tremendous showing. And of course, I'm reminded by the fact that a lot of those secretaries are women. Where you recall the previous administration had did they have women? I think it was Elaine Chao was one of their sole. The DeVos was Secretary of Education, so they had a couple of women in there, but mostly was men and sort of institutional men that were running the cabinet and all the cabinet's posts that were important. So there's good reason maybe you should consider.
We're remarkably short on foreign agents.
That's very funny.
In the cabinet.
Yeah.
I don't imagine that you're going to find any of Biden's cabinet picks. Okay, because he just seemed random at the time. Like Rick Perry went over to Ukraine to screw around to try and gin up, an attack on the 2020 election. I'm gonna be kind of shocked if, I don't know if we find Gina Raimondo going down to Brazil to gin up something against any of the GOP.
She's not doing any schemes. She's not involved in scheming. Where
no one's going to be working with like Ukrainian mob figures to threaten U.S. ambassadors.
None of that's going to happen. You're right.
Something else like there's a lot of hurry, please indict Trump.
Yeah,
there's so much to fix, and I don't think much as we talk about all the things that Joe Biden's had going on. Merrick Garland has had an enormous number of things going on the last 2 years, and
anyway, people should understand that Merrick Garland as well has. These are tricky cases. These are not the kind of cases that are slam dunks, and yet they need to be slam dunks if you're going to be indicting a president of the United States. You need to be pretty sure that you're going to get him found guilty. Otherwise, you shouldn't do it probably. And so people, January 6th is a difficult case to prosecute. It is. It just is. And for the president of the United States, it's going to be difficult to prosecute. There's a story there. You can definitely connect him to everything that happened on January the 6th, but is it it's just a very tricky crime, especially because it deals with freedom of speech and all sorts of other things. But for sure, there's an argument that you could indict him on that, and you might get him. The other case, the Mar-a-Lago case, I think is much more indictable, but it's also secretive. You can't even tell people what it is. You can't even explain to people what has happened and you have to if you're going to try and indict the president of the United States. But the fact that he stole secrets and then tried to market them around the world to our enemies is unheard of. It's not even. Of course, that's a crime. Of course, he should be indicted for that. Can they really reveal all of that? Or are they going to be giving up their sources? Are they going to giving up their methods? I don't know. It's a very, very complicated case. I do think that they will indict him on that because he just deserves it. People died from that. And, there's no doubt in my mind that he should be indicted. But the fact that there's people saying, oh, Merrick Garland is some sort of evil guy who's not doing his job, that's not true. That's not true. I mean, you can look at the DOJ feed every day that you put up. You're a constant monitor of that every single day. There's a major prosecution of a major scheme or money laundering effort or mob effort or whatever. It happens every day.
Into billions, yeah. And if you're feeling down and you're like, God, there's no good progress here, go to justice.gov, USAO press releases. For just the list of what their announced cases are. On the left side, there's a button there for Project Safe Childhood. So you can go down through any one of their any one of their initiatives, and just see the headlines on that. So Project Safe Childhood is anybody who's committing a federal crime against children, which are almost all gross. That's where it turns up. It's like they have like 10 federal cases they're announcing something about every day. And while the facts are, evident of really heinous acts, it's also like, the computers made it so that there was forensic evidence all over the place. If you are in that unholy business, then the feds are going to get you. And that's happening every day. There's also been a huge renaissance in the use of the civil rights section, criminal investigation people, where if you're a prosecutor in, say, Jefferson County, Missouri, and you demand sexual favors from defendants to give them lighter charges, you get hit with 18 U.S. Code 242 charges. If you're, they're taking law enforcement officers and police, or I should say like prison employees, who are either engaging in, unreasonable violent force or are trafficking drugs in prisons and stuff like that, getting civil rights charges. They're getting federal charges. Like, it does not pay to be a dirty cop. It does not pay to be a dirty prosecutor. This is the real government. This is the real America that's going on. This is the real Biden administration.
And they're not only doing that, they're doing that at the same time as they're prosecuting the biggest crime investigation in history. I mean, January 6th has taken up a lot of their resources. It's an entire division of theirs that they are, constantly having to deal with. There's been so many indicted people there. Plus the renewed threat of domestic terrorists that only came around because of the previous administration. I mean, this is such a criminal party and such a criminal form of administration. The fact that they're even allowed to walk free in the streets is just beyond me. But there's definitely a concerted and strong effort to have them to have them policed and indicted. I'm just looking at some of this early results still coming in from Georgia, and it's looking good for Warnock. I don't think Herschel Walker is going to get this. I mean, looking at some particularly skewed.
There were some flaws in the candidate.
Yeah, there were a couple of. I mean, the anti-abortion candidate who had his girlfriends or ex-girlfriends had 2 abortions is an issue.
I mean, he
shake your head,
He's not. There's that hypocrisy, but there's tons of Republicans that are hypocrites on that if you look into it. But he's a guy that cannot. I mean, he's not suitable for office.
No, and he's not smart enough to be in office. And you've got a guy like Raphael Warnock who's remarkable, who has good deep roots in the community, who they respect him, who's just had a remarkable first term. It's now the reverse is not happening. It looks like to Kemp and Walker, to Stacey Abrams. It looks like Warnock may win, but I don't know if Abrams will win, and that'll be interesting. But we'll see what happens. I guess it's a lot to ask of. She's at, and these are all specific to different counties that they're doing now, so I don't want to run into them because I may land up lying about some stuff. But we'll see. We'll see. I think we are going to see Abrams win at the end of the night. I do think we're going to see a sweep. I think this is turning out to be a very horrible night for Republicans, and we haven't seen the big ones fall down yet. But when you look at all the races we're still waiting for, they're all the Republican leaning races that are not showing up very quickly, and that's an indication perhaps that they might flip. Now we could stay talking forever, and I don't know if we should. I suspect we're pretty close to a call on the Senate, so I'm sort of hedging a little bit here and just keeping on going. But it is now 9:11.
Let's get rolling.
Yeah. You want to keep going, or do you want to?
Maybe I'm in for the night. Let's this.
I can keep doing this, but I don't want to do the whole night because I'm going to run out of things to say. By the way, we should check the chat. Speaking of things to say, I have a strong recollection of what it was like the week before President Obama was elected president, because I went down to Virginia to hear him speak at one of his rallies just before he was elected, and there was this kind of feeling on the ground that you had rarely seen anywhere else, and it was remarkable, the amount of energy and enthusiasm. Now, I wasn't on the ground today, and I could not tell what people were saying, but I could hear from other people's comments that they were feeling that kind of energy that happened before President Obama was elected. And you could sense it in the way they were describing what it was like, just these long queues of people standing in line for so long, and the youth vote showing up, and the general enthusiasm. I mean, it's a lot about the enthusiasm at the end of the day in election days. And there was certainly a lot of it the week before Obama was elected president. I think that's what went on today. I think we're sort of in that same world. And I think Republicans are going to wake up realizing that they have caused themselves a lot, that they might not actually be able to recover. Certainly in the House, they might win there. But in the Senate, it's going to be a little complicated. I agree with your overall sentiment there in terms of we'll take a little break for a little while and come back if there's any big news.
We'll get the watched pot boiling and whatnot.
And it may not be tonight. It may be tomorrow. It may be, who knows when it's going to be. But, overall, my gut is telling me still that we're in for a very, very good election for the Democrats. And I think voting is still happening in some places around the country. Hopefully this is a wake-up call for the GOP, and maybe it's time for the GOP to realize that they can't be trusting all their foreign partners to get them through everything all the time. I did see some worrying signs that they, as you mentioned, not Prigozhin and others were hinting at some sort of interference. If the Republicans do well, I'm going to tell you, I think it's only because of that.
They're distracting me with laughter, I guess.
Well, that's good. I like to hear you laughing. All right, so let's leave it there. Thank you for watching Narrative tonight. You can always support us at patreon.com/narrative. You can also hit the subscribe button if you're watching us on YouTube. If you're watching us on a podcast or listening to us on a podcast, don't forget to follow, rate, or review the podcast. And if we don't see you later tonight, which is quite plausible that we won't, then we shall see you on Thursday, where we will review all these results and tell you a whole lot of other interesting things that we have planned in the near future for Narrative. On that note, Eric Garland, author extraordinaire of Future Inc. and many other things, thank you for tonight. And anything else you want to say?
See you around. Strap in.
All right. We'll see you around. Have a good night, everybody.
Every minute of Narrative's reporting, every story that we break is made possible by our patrons. You too can become a patron by joining at patreon.com/narrative.
Narrative, where truth lives. One day, you'll tell the story of autocrats, crooks, and kings who came for our freedom. A story of citizens who stood up to tyranny and won. The people prevailed. and renewed an old vow to a more perfect union. And that was just the beginning. The story continues. Narrative, where truth lives.